The expression, making hay while the sun shines, came to me while I was walking my dog in a natural area behind the houses in our neighborhood. I saw several different varieties of weeds that I love to use in my collages and mixed media work. In this video, I'll show you how to transform these often overlooked plants into stunning art using the gel plate. Despite the debris and the inevitable cleanup, the textures and patterns that these plants create make it all worthwhile. Join me as I explore the creative possibilities of using the organic beauty of vacant lot vegetation to craft beautiful prints. Often, when I'm walking around our neighborhood and in some of the natural areas behind the houses and whatnot in the fields, I find some really interesting plants. And my first thought is, how well will they print? So I'm forever feeling things. Are the seeds going to come off? How would it look on the plate? And when I find something that I think might be interesting, then I'll go ahead and create some prints out of it. The thing is, these plants will only exist for a short period of time in my region. And then for the rest of the year, I have to rely on things that I've made during this time to use from my stash. So today, that is going to be what I'm going to be doing. This one was quite unusual. I haven't worked with this before, and I'm really looking forward to see how all these seed heads print on the plate. I'm totally expecting there to be a fair bit of debris left on the plate after I print these, squishing them all down. Some stuff will come off. So it's always a question about, should I be using my big plate for this, or should I be using perhaps my 12 by 14, which is easier to get to the sink and wash off. So the first batch that I'm going to be printing up is really tall. So I'm going to do it on the big plate and just keep my fingers crossed that it's not too much of a mess when I get finished. All of the paints that I use on the gel plate, most of the time, there's some techniques which I don't, but most of the time I use the golden open paints. And I like those because I get several different prints, negative prints and positive prints out of them. So they just work well for me. I have quite a bit of time to play with them. I don't have to rush too much to try to get a particular print made. There we go. So this is just carbon black and anthracnone blue. I'm going to be printing onto the Spectra art tissue, which isn't quite as big as my plate. It's a little bit shorter than my plate, so I don't have to ink it all up. There we go. Nice even coating. So with each of these roll-ups, I will be probably picking up at least two background prints, which is what I call the negative prints, and then at least two positive prints. And I'm going to take time here, and this is why it's nice to have the golden open paint, is I'm going to take the time to rub around all the details of these particular seeds. And if you're dealing with a regular heavy-bodied paint or fluid paint, it just starts to dry up. You'd have a tough time getting the positive print done in the amount of time before it dried after doing a negative print. So the golden just gives me more prints, the golden open, more prints, and more flexibility. Oops. There come a couple of little seed pods out. If I get a few tears in this first tissue, I'm not that concerned about it. This one I would not use for the basis of a work itself, it might have pieces that get cut out of it that would be used. So, you know, if I get the odd little bit of tear here and there, well, that's just fine. I can just work around it. Well, that's quite an interesting pattern, and I do like those seed heads. This is looking quite interesting with some of the splotches and things on it. This is one of the unique things about a gel plate, is you can take a print from something with a bit of a three-dimensional nature, because the gel plate's squishy. It's like a bowl of Jell-O, squishes down. And because of that, you get an impression while this material is being pushed into the gel plate that you really couldn't do on a different kind of monoprinting technique. It just wouldn't be possible. I have a feeling this tissue is going to be quite interesting. Oh yeah, look at that. I still have voids where the plant matter was. But I have rather an interesting background. Okay. Now I can see here I do have a bit of cleanup to do. I've got quite a few of these seed pods came off, which is, you know, to be expected. Anytime you're printing something a bit fragile like weeds and whatnot, you're going to get some debris. There we go. So this one is going to be a really good one for my stash, for the backgrounds in the winter when I'm working on print and mixed media art. So from the first weed, I think these are my two favorite prints. It was in a roll-up, obviously with some transparent red iron oxide, some carbon black on it. And this was a second negative print, but I really quite like the splotches and the textures in the background. And although it might not be a star in one of my paintings, I could totally see using different parts of it. And to do that, what I usually do is just use a couple little framing boards and maybe finding pieces that I could, you know, cut out and that might suit a particular purpose. This one was the first positive print from this same rollout. And this one I would see as being the star. Possibly not all of it, possibly cut into strips and put into pieces on a larger canvas, or possibly just, you know, put pretty much the way that you see it right here onto a canvas as pulling everything else together. So this next weed is a bit different, but in a way, very similar. It's I think it's going to be interesting to work with. I'm using transparent red iron oxide, some purple, dioxazine purple, and some Payne's gray. This next weed has seed heads like the other one, but just interspersed in a different way. This one probably could have used being put under some weight as well, but it seemed to be wilting. So I thought I better use it more quickly. It's got an interesting little pattern in it. This was growing up in the cracks in a neighbor's driveway. I didn't think they'd miss it. So I went with my scissors and snipped it. Oh yeah, that's quite a nice mark. Again, you can see more of the colors, I think, in the negative print. And I think I'm just going to do a third negative to clean the background off a little bit more. Especially that purple color, but also the anthracnone blue, or I'm sorry, was Payne's gray. They just seem to stick around longer than some of the other colors, which is nice. It gives you some very subtle imagery. An extra print. Starting to get a little bit hard to pull the tissue off. I'm having to be just a little bit more careful. If you were using dollar store tissue, you would be totally hooped at this point. But this Spectra art tissue is a little bit stronger. And I love that. That is just gorgeous. I love the negative shapes in here with the white voids and the warm ones down in here. So, nice tissue. And then I think these guys can come off. Oh, and they're not leaving too much debris. That's awesome. They're hanging on to their seed heads a little bit harder. It's trying to catch the weeds between flowering, which gives you one type of shape, and before the seed heads are so developed that they just fall off really easily. So I just happened to be wandering around today and got lucky. Oh, and this is going to be a very nice, strong, positive print. As you can see with that, that's just lovely. And there should be enough paint left on the plate to give me a fairly good ghost. Or second positive. Oh yeah. In my mixed media work, this type of one could go on at an earlier stage and just be shapes that I can work into with the paint and other collage materials as I progress. From the second weed that I used, these two might be my favorites. So this is actually a third negative pull. So the first pull took off the bulk of the ink, but there was still quite a lot there because the colors are fairly strong on the second negative. And this one I find really quite intriguing because it has some really nice, interesting negative shapes, still has the white voids. And again, you know, I would use this piece by taking chunks out of it. So, you know, something like that. If I needed that kind of a shape and configuration in a mixed media work, then that would be a great tissue to use. This one is the first positive from that pull, as well as transparent iron oxide and dioxazine purple. There was also some Payne's gray in this. And this I could see using perhaps that chunk somewhere in a painting, perhaps this chunk, these pieces, or all together. It's really hard to say how this one would come into use, but I'm looking forward to using it in a painting. So the next type of weed I'm going to be working on, I know for a fact sheds a lot of debris. It's just one of those types of weeds. I really love its shapes, but in terms of the stuff it leaves on the plate, I know I'm going to end up having to do a big wash up in the sink. So I'm going to use my slightly smaller plate. This one is 14 inches by 12 inches and not so unwieldy for me to manage. So this is a little bit of Payne's gray. A little bit of dioxazine purple. And then of course my favorite, transparent red iron oxide. I'm going to put quite a bit of it on the plate because it's not a very strong color. The other two colors will overwhelm it fairly easily. And this particular weed I have put under weight for a while because it really does need some flattening before I use it. There we go. That's the kind of shape I get from this particular weed. Very nice silhouettes. I'm sure I'll find a use for that first negative print, but the second and third negative prints are probably of the most use to me, plus of course, the positives. I found some of this in the very early winter, late fall last year, and I thought, oh wow, this is fantastic. And I brought it in and printed it, and oh my goodness, what a mess on the plate. So that's the second negative. Quite like the pattern. And as you can see, there's still lots of paint left on the plate to get a third negative from. And of these colors, the transparent red iron oxide tends to fade out pretty early, but the other two colors give you a bit more. They push through. Oh yeah, that's quite pretty. And I think I'm even going to do a fourth negative out of this. There was quite a lot of paint on the plate. I like to rip some of these vertically and then intersperse them along my canvas. And they just make some very interesting shapes when I'm working with the paint to paint into. Okay, let's see how much of a mess I get here. Oh, that's not bad at all. There's a little bit of crumbly stuff, but the little bit of crumbly stuff will actually make some interesting voids in the transfer of the paint. Now, this is what I like about this particular weed. It just gives you some really interesting shapes. And this one, although lighter, I still find that of a lot of interest. And I have some of these as second layers, not the top layer, but as second layers in some of my mixed media pieces that have won awards at shows. I really love the shapes. And from my last weed, this one I really liked. This is actually a first negative. So often too dark to be used for a lot in my work directly. Chunks of it are fine. This one I quite liked. I felt that it had a nice little color roll up there and nice clear negative spaces. This one was the first positive of a different roll up, but generally using the same colors as well. It's very crisp. It has some lovely, triangular shapes in it, some nice linear elements in it. And again, I could see using this as the piece that pulls together a mixed media work.